A'udhu billah minash shaitanir rajim. We seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Salãmun Alaykum. Peace be upon you. God willing, today we want to start another session for the studying of the appendices of Quran, the Final Testament, the authorized translation by Dr. Rashad Khalifa, the Messenger of the Covenant. And God willing, today we want to start from the section 6. In the last episode, we talked about the mathematical coding of special words, the word God, Allah, and we talked about the physical facts, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this session, God willing, we want to start with number 6. The word God occurs in 85 surahs. If we add the number of each surah to the number of verses between the first and the last occurrences of the word God, both verses inclusive, the grand total comes to 8,170 or 19 times 430. An abbreviated representation of the data is shown in table 19. Okay, so what does this mean? This is basically the concatenated format or the abbreviated format of what I'm going to show you later, God willing. But let's take a look at this and see what we have here. So we have 5 columns here, basically. So on the left side, we have the numbers, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to the, here we have 85. So there are 85 surahs in the Quran from the 114 surahs that contain the word God in them. There are some surahs that don't have even one word God in them. That's a physical fact. You can check it for yourself. Now, on the second column, basically, we have surah number, the chapter numbers where the word God has occurred. The first surah that it occurs is surah or chapter 1. The last one is 112 in the Quran. And then here, this column talks about the first verse in the chapter where the word God has occurred. And this column is the last verse where the word God has occurred in that respective chapter or surah number. And then the last column is verses first to last, and that is the difference between these two. For example, the last verse is number 2, right? And the first verse is number 1. So 2 minus 1 would be 1, but actually it is 2 because it is inclusive of both verses, right? We are going to look at the difference between the 2 verses, but both of them inclusive. We're not going to take one out because the word God has occurred in one of them as well. For example, in chapter 2, the first place that the word God occurs is verse 7, the first one. And the last verse is 286 where the word God occurs. So 286 minus 7 is 279, but inclusive of this verse, which is the first verse that it has occurred, becomes 280. So this is what we will do until actually the last surah, the last chapter in the Quran, where the word God has occurred in it. So now let's look at the opened up version, complete version of this abbreviated representation of the data. Now, if you look at this table, I have created this table. It's the same table, now the opened up version, and I have checked all these myself, basically. So we have, again, the number, just number from 1 to 85, basically. And then the second one is the surah number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We just go all the way to 112. But then at some certain point, for example, at this point, you will see that up to this point, all the surahs in the Quran contain at least one word God in them. At least there was one verse that there was one word God in it, right? But then from this point forward, it's not the same. The numbers are not the same, basically. They don't match. And it means that, for example, chapter 54 doesn't have a word God in it. Chapter 55, chapter 56 don't have a word God in it. And then after 53, we jump to 57 because the next chapter that has a word God in it is basically chapter 57. And then 58, 59, 60, 61, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then chapter 68 doesn't have basically a word God in it. And then we jump to chapter 69. So this is how this second column is basically ordered. Then the first verse and the last verse that I just explained, that the word God occurs in it. And then the last column, which is the distance basically between the first verse and the last verse inclusive, basically, right? Now, chapter 9 is the surah or the chapter in the Quran, which previous to this mathematical miracle of the Quran contained 129 verses, but we know from the mathematical coding of the Quran that there are two man-made injections, satanic verses in the Quran, basically, which are already removed from the Quran. So verses 128 and 129 are not part of the Quran, and God willing, we will talk about that in the future episodes to come. But if you're interested, you can go to several appendices in the Quran after the Appendix 1 that explain why those two verses are satanic and injected. So basically, we have 127 verses for chapter 9. So the first place in chapter 9 that the word God occurs is verse 1. The last one is 127. Now, there is some cases that we only have one verse in one chapter that has the word God in it. So the first verse basically would be, for example, for chapter 32, the first verse would be verse 4, and the last verse will also be verse 4. But then 4 minus 4 would be 0, but then inclusive of that verse, it becomes 1. So there's only one verse in that chapter that has the word God in it. So we write 1 here. And I have created a formula for this, that if you click on it, you will see that we have this column, this value in this row, in this column basically, minus this value, right? Plus 1, because we want to have that one inclusive. And I have done it for the first parts. I have done it basically manually, right? Up to chapter 6, I have done it manually. But then from chapter 7, I have created this formula to make it easier for myself. And there are some other chapters that have the same case at chapter 32, that there's only one verse that has the word God in it. And that's the distance would be basically 1, first to last verse, because that is inclusive, right? So chapter 50, 26 is the first one and the last one, basically. So there's only 1. And then we have chapter 69, chapter 70, 73, 79, 81, 82, 84, 87, 88, 91, 95, 96, and 104. These are the chapters that have only one verse in them that has the word God in them. So basically, we have the number 1 on this section for these chapters. Now let's look at the basically cumulative total of these two columns, surah number and verses 1 to last. If you look at the PDF, you would see that the surah number section is 3,910. And if you look at here, you see 3,910 as well. And if you look at this column, you would see 4,260. And here we have 4,260 as well. SubhanAllah. Praise be to God, Lord of the universe. Now, both of them together, the cumulative total becomes 8,170. This is the number that we have here, 8,170, and that is 19 times 430. And I have divided this number by 19, and it becomes 19 times 430. So this calculation is absolutely correct, and it absolutely checks out. Praise be to God, Lord of the universe. Now let's move to number 7. The Quran's dominant message is that there is only one God. The word one in Arabic, wahid, occurs in the Quran 25 times. 6 of these occurrences refer to other than God, one kind of food, one door, etc. The other 19 occurrences refer to God. These data are found in the classic reference index to the words of Quran. So I have checked it myself, and I have found all the verses in the Quran that have the word wahid in them, and I have created 2 sets basically. One set for the ones which are related to God, as in one God or the one, which refers to God, and then another basically category that are related. We have the word wahid, but it's not related to the idea of God being one. So let's look at these verses. We have 133, Ilahan Wahidan, right? One God. 163, Ilahun Wahidun, again, one God. 171, Ilahun Wahidun, one God. 73, Ilahun Wahidun, one God. 619, Ilahun Wahidun, one God. 931, Ilahan Wahidan, one God. 1239, this is the first place that we have Al-Wahid, which means the one, right? So Al in Arabic is the same as the in English, which means the. So al-wahid means the one, basically. So it refers to God in this case. And then we have 13, 16, al-wahid. 1448, al-wahid means the one. Then we have ilahun wahidun in 1452, one God. 1622, ilahun wahidun, one God. 1651, ilahun wahidun, one God. 18110, ilahun wahidun, one God. 21108, ilahun wahidun, one God. 385, ilahan wahidan, one God. And then al-wahid, again, the one, which refers to God, the one God, basically. And then al-wahid 39.4, which is also the one. Then 40.16, al-wahid, again the one. And then the last one is 41.6, which is Allahun wahidun, which means one God. So these are all 19 occurrences of the word which are relevant to the idea of God being the one in the Quran. So let's count them together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Praise be to God, Lord of the universe. This is absolutely fantastic. Now, these are 6 places that the word wahid has occurred in the Quran, but they are irrelevant to the idea of God being the one. So it's the first one is 261. It refers to ta'amun wahid, means one kind of food. It is about children of Israel asking Moses and telling him that, oh, Moses, we can no longer tolerate one kind of food. So we have the word wahid, but it's related to food, has nothing to do with God, this wahid. Then we have 213, that we have this word, ummatun wahidatun, which means one community, right? And then 4.1, we have nafsan wahidatun, which means one being. And then fawahidatan, it means only one. It refers in the context of marriage, right? And then it's irrelevant to the idea of God being one. And then 548, ummatan wahidatan, which is translated here as one congregation or one community, basically. And then the last one is 1267, which is baban wahidan, means one door. It is Prophet Jacob telling his sons when they are going back to Prophet Joseph in Egypt. He told them, oh, my sons, do not enter from one door, enter through separate doors. So this one is also about door, and it's irrelevant to the idea of God being the one. So we have 6 here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it absolutely checks out with the idea of 25 times of the word wahid occurring in the Quran. So 6 of them are irrelevant to God, and 19 of them are related to God and refer to God. Praise be to God, Lord of the universe. Now, the last point here, the crucial importance of the word one, as the Quran's basic message is manifested in the fact that the Quran's common denominator, 19, happens to be the geometrical value of the word one. And previously we have talked about the geometrical value. Looking at this table, the word wahid is written in this way in Arabic, right? Wahid, right? Wav, Aleph, He, and Dal, right? So the geometrical value of the word wahid is for each and every letter becomes a cumulative total of 19. So the addition of these 4 letters, the geometrical value for these 4 letters becomes 19. So Wav is 6 according to this table. Wav is 6. Aleph is 1. We have Aleph is 1. He is 8. He is 8. And then Dal is 4. And Dal is 4. So 6 plus 1 is 7. 7 plus 8 is 15. 15 plus 4 becomes 19. So this is 19, and that's basically the common denominator of the Quran. And everything up to this point, you see that it is either 19 or a multiple of 19. And this is the beauty of this mathematical miracle, which is a very unified thing, and it relates to the idea of God being one, basically. And that's the core message of the Quran. All right, so that's what has been mentioned here. So we have talked about these points up to this section. God willing, in the next episode, we're going to talk about why 19, and we will continue onward with the rest of the appendix. Until the next episode and the next session, may God be with you. Peace be upon you. Salāmun Alaykum.